Katie, welcome. It's time for your pop quiz. So your pop culture quiz of the day is a very controversial one in my opinion, but if you had to choose, would you choose pink or purple?
Oh, pink. That's very easy for me.
Oh my gosh.
Most of my wardrobe is pink, and then now that has bled over into everything that I get for Ellie. So yeah.
Well, welcome to the Renew podcast presented by Rent Spree. I'm Lauren Martin, sales director of the prop tech company Rent Spree. This podcast is a featured offering of the Renew initiative that aims to elevate female voices, share insight on how to navigate industry challenges, and showcase the remarkable achievements of women in real estate. In this episode, I am so excited to be talking to Katie Smithson, Chief Revenue Officer at California Regional MLS. Katie is a 14-year real estate veteran. She started her current role just last November after her gig as Director of MLS Relations with Zillow. When Katie isn't busy with her work responsibilities, she's traveling the world and running 10Ks, which honestly is super impressive because I will let you know, I actually ran out of breath going up 2 flights of stairs this morning to get a package. And I was like, man, I am so out of shape. It's embarrassing. Here I am having to talk to somebody who just like casually runs 10Ks. I can't even run up 2 flights of stairs.
No, don't worry. I would not say that I'm casually running 10Ks. Like it's going to be a challenge for me. But yeah, it was, in a long time ago, when I was younger, I actually did a lot more running, and over the course of probably like 4 or 5 years, I ran 5 half marathons.
Whoa.
But then I kind of got out of running for a while.
That's 5 more than me, girl.
Yeah. But then like now that I'm through pregnancy and have a toddler, I've been trying to get back into running. My husband was actually motivated to join me. So now we've done a couple of 5Ks together, and he found this one in Banff, Canada in June. And we're going to go do that so it's like middle of June. We're going to make a long weekend of it. We're going with another couple, and we're going to run a 10K together. So, I mean, he's probably going to leave me in the dust, but it's fine.
That's totally relationship goals right there. I feel like I don't have a kid, but I feel like having a kid is quite the workout. Like I'm stressed about the day I have to like pick it up, and carry it. Like that's a lot. Sometimes my dog will like pull me on a leash. I'm like, oh, this is a workout. I'm exhausted.
Well, I have discovered, so I also have 2 dogs in addition to a now 2-year-old. But I've seen I've discovered that there's a lot of similarities between toddlers and dogs, and like the commands you have to give to them, and like trying to get them to listen. Yes. Yeah.
That is so awesome. Yeah. Like
the question of like, do you need to go potty?
Let's go potty before we go night-night.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's very similar conversations.
Honestly, that's so comforting to hear, because I thought I struggled with my dog. She's a rescue from Puerto Rico, and she's like a feral stray dog that listens to nothing. She's so sassy. And I'm like, heaven help me, man. I can't even control this thing.
Yeah. I mean, having a kid might be easier than that.
I find a lot of comfort in that.
Good.
Honestly, to me, having a kid sounds easier than running a 10K. So congratulations to you and your husband.
You. Is
there a lot that you have to do? I know this is not real estate related, but for those who care, is there a lot that you have to do to prepare for that? Because I feel like,
I think it just kind of depends on for me, it's really just like since I'm kind of just getting back into running again, I really just want to finish. Like I don't have like a time goal or anything. So I'm just trying to like build up the mileage. So I've got like a running plan. So many days a week I run, so many days a week I strength train. So just, kind of doing a little bit of exercise every day and trying to move, and
good for you.
Just get the miles under my feet. So yeah.
That's awesome. There's actually, I run I've actually never said this on a podcast before, so this is coming out, but I was actually diagnosed with cancer a couple of years ago. And I'm good now. But I do partake in the run that they do every year. It's
that's
very
great.
near and dear to my heart, but I run with the best intention, 5 minutes. I'm like, I gave it my all.
Hey, that's, a lot of time that's more than what most people do. So you should definitely pat yourself on the back for that.
I ran for 5 minutes. They handed me a juice box. I showed myself for this cause. So I aspire to be you. One day I will run. I think it's a 5K. So one day I will run a third of it.
Hey, it's always good to have goals.
Exactly. Well, I'm sure people are loving this, but they came for the real estate. So we'll hop right in. Other than running and raising children and dogs, you have such an incredible and inspiring background. So just to get us started, Katie, if you wouldn't mind just kind of telling us your journey through real estate and how you got to where you are today.
All right. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and I want to put this disclaimer out here because my husband says I'm a terrible storyteller. So if I start like meandering too much, just, tell me to rein it in. I don't want to go off on too many tangents, but basically like after college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went between jobs I waited tables for a while. I worked at a cell phone company for a while. I actually worked at a forklift dealership for a while, but I used to know a lot about forklifts, but
I feel like that's something that's important to carry to the rest of your life,
Yeah. I used to be able to like walk into a Home Depot and be like, oh, that forklift can lift X amount of weight, whatever.
I'm sure you really impressed your husband with that.
Yeah, totally. I was always in some sort of like sales or marketing type capacity, whether it was like just administrative or actually like selling something. So I ended up in Knoxville, Tennessee. I was born and raised in Franklin, Tennessee. And then like I gradually just kind of moved east from there, but I ended up in Knoxville. I was working for a local mortgage company there. And I was in like the secondary marketing department. So basically that was where we like packaged and resold the mortgages to bigger banks. But the mortgage company was actually a customer of Courthouse Retrieval System, which is now CRS Data. And I happened to notice a LinkedIn job posting at CRS. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to apply. Like I wasn't loving what I was doing. So I was like, I want to just give this a shot and see if I get it. And I did. It was for, they were looking for essentially a national trainer to go out and actually train on the tax suite that they provide to agents and brokers. So I started that. I was there for about 3 years, I think, 3 or 4 years. And because I was then traveling and going to conferences and everything, I actually met Greg Robertson at CMLS. We started talking at the lobby bar, and he was at the time, W&R Studios was still relatively small, looking to grow. And we just started chatting. And over the course of a few months, he ended up offering me a job there. It seemed like a good opportunity to kind of start something new. So that got me in with W&R Studios. I was there for 8 years. Starting out there, I was really selling Cloud CMA directly to agents and brokers. But as the company grew, my role grew. I had relationships with a lot of MLS executives from my previous job with CRS. So Greg kind of leveraged that, and we started really focusing on targeting MLSs as potential like larger deals. So that's what I did for a while. Eventually, I was put in charge of our outside sales team. So I was still handling a lot of the MLS deals, but then we had 2 sales reps that did like broker and franchise sales. Eventually, WNR Studios was sold to Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf was actually kept me in a leadership role. So I was I was still reporting directly to Greg, and we were in the basically the MLS division. And I was there for about a year after the acquisition. And then I found a role at Zillow that seemed intriguing. So I took that. I think the timing was a little off when I joined Zillow. There were a lot of changes happening. At the time that I joined, it was like right after they decided to end the iBuying program, or their Zillow offers program.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was just a lot of shuffling around, and this opportunity came around with CRMLS. And I've known that the group at CRMLS for a very long time because they were long customers of WNR Studios. And so it just seemed like a good opportunity. And here I am. So I hope I didn't meander around too long, but that's basically how I ended up where I am.
I don't know what your husband's talking about. That was very concise and good.
Thank you.
I do have a question though. So something you said is exactly what happened to me. In my real estate journey, I started at Remine, 5 years ago now. And I started doing agent and broker sales, traveling all over, doing, office visits and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And we kind of made a switch the same. We said, all right, we're not going to focus on so much on the agents and brokers and go over to the MLS side. And it was a big shift. So I'm curious if you found any like similarities or differences when you switched from agent and broker to MLSs. Like, did you find one easier, more fulfilling, or they were about the same? Any challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this is just was a personal thing for me. I enjoyed selling to the MLSs more. Mm-hmm. And I don't it's nothing against selling direct to agents or brokers, but I think it was just, I think having that experience and really understanding how agents and brokers were using the tool really helped the conversations when you're talking to the MLS executives and trying to position, here's a tool that can be beneficial to your membership and here's why, you take that background and just, use that to make your case when you're trying to sell it as a larger deal. So, and there's just something about again, this might be my personal thing, but there's just something about getting a big deal like that with an MLS where you've got this larger chunk of a commitment from them as opposed to just getting an individual agent to sign up, which that also comes with its own little, satisfaction. But
no, I definitely agree. I think that both were great in their own way, to your point. There's and you probably feel the same. There's a satisfaction working with an agent, and it was just a different rush. You would work with them and you'd get a click oh my gosh, this is going to help my business so much. It's very fulfilling, right? This is going to cut out so much time in my life, and it's easier and it helps me get my job done faster. There's that instant gratification of, okay, I changed the course, maybe not a huge amount, but slightly to make their life easier. And you get that same with working with brokers, that very rewarding moment, right? But then when you work with MLSs, you still have that rewarding moment. It's just knowing that I helped provide a tool that's worth something to so many within that MLS organization. Definitely it was very different for me going from the broker and agent side to the MLS side. It's longer, it takes, a lot.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Which I think adds to a little to the satisfaction. When you finally get that deal closed, it's some of them, there were deals that I worked on for 6-9 months, it just, and it's okay, we finally crossed the hurdle.
Some years.
Exactly.
I'm yes, finally.
Right. Exactly.
Eating cake tonight.
Definitely.
But I definitely agree. And it's a very unique thing, I think, because it allows you to see all the aspects, like you said, like helping the agents and the brokers and hearing their pain points and what they got excited about and what they were like,
Mhm.
but
Right.
then I could take all those reactions and take it back to the MLS and say, look, like, here's what your agents care about. I know because I spent
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z amount of time in front of them. So
Yep.
I don't know. Did you feel that way? That like that really helped frame your conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also something, like we worked a lot of trade shows and, being at the booth and talking to agents and like they come by and, like they give you that feedback and it's all, there were, there were a lot of times where it's like you'd hear stories from agents about how they were using the product and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that. I mean, there was a feature that we released in Cloud CMA, like it was What's My Home Worth landing page that
Mhm.
really came about because agents were kind of telling us like, here's how I've been using the quick CMA to do
Mhm.
prospecting. And it's like, oh, okay, well, let's make that a feature. And
Yeah.
so it was a big hit. So yeah, it was just like very cool things like that. But exactly what you said, like you can take that feedback and then go to the MLS and say, like, here's why this is beneficial. Here's what I'm hearing from your membership. And this is why I think it would be good for you to offer it as a member benefit. So
Yeah. And to your point, like it just helps you understand the product better, right? Like I've never been a
mhm.
product person, I'm a relationship person. But so many times, I feel confident going to the product team and being like, look, like this is the feedback we've gotten. I looked into your background and I saw that you graduated in marketing. Is that correct? That's what you went to school for?
That is, yes. Yeah.
Me too. Me too. I fashion design originally, but you can tell that's gone nowhere. So, but do you feel like you had a driving factor that like brought you into the MLS world or in the real estate world, I should say? Or did it just kind of, like you said, like you saw an open position and you applied and it just kind of happened that way?
Yeah, it definitely just, it was kind of a happenstance, like
Yeah.
I never necessarily set out to like, oh, I want to be in real estate.
Yeah.
It was just kind of, real estate is always one of those things. I think everybody is like fascinated by it, but
Yeah.
I never really saw like right after college, I never saw like a direct path of getting into anything real estate related. It is kind of funny though, thinking back, like when I was working at that cell phone store that I was talking about. I mean, it was like a little locally owned cell phone shop.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember this was like when Blackberries were like they were really huge, and the
Mhm.
big thing was like the Blackberry rep came in and was talking about how the local MLS, which is Real Tracks in Nashville,
Mhm.
um, had actually created this online database. So now real estate agents could look up listings on their Blackberries, and
That's
like that
so
was the
cool.
selling point. Yeah, and I was like, so now we can sell Blackberries to real estate agents, and this is why. And yeah, so it was like that was kind of funny thinking back on. But yeah, other than that, it was just kind of like this strange little path that I ended up on. And yeah, I mean, I've obviously been in the industry for a while. I do love it. It's like, I don't know, kind of become like a family. So
Yeah, it really is. Actually, one of my old bosses at Remind, he told me it was Joe Kazoon. He's at Zillow now, but he told
mhm.
me that real estate, you just change the name on your business card
Yep.
and you never leave. And it's so
It's
true,
very
right?
true.
Like once you're in, you are in, man. Like you're not getting out. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's very rewarding and it's an industry that people need and people always need places to live and it is changing and
Mhm.
growing. So, it's hard to leave. It is like a little family. You grow to love
Yeah.
everybody and we see each other at conferences all the time. So it's like a
Yeah.
family.
Yeah, definitely.
So I do have a question for you. I'm curious because I'm on the vendor side of things, and you've kind
Mhm.
of done both.
Yeah.
You were on the vendor side, and now you're with an MLS. What would you say the biggest differences and similarities are? Like, is there things that you're like, man, this is so similar and I've learned so much? And is there like hurdles you've had to overcome kind of making that
Yeah.
switch?
Yeah. I mean, I think, one of the biggest differences is on the vendor side. I mean, I was always like working for a company with a specific product, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like having that product knowledge, like that's what I focused on. Like, how are we going to improve that? How are we going to sell it? All of those things. But being on the MLS side, it's more, obviously there's more than one product to consider, right?
Yeah, for sure.
There's all the products. So it's not just, you're not just thinking of how a certain product is going to benefit the membership. It's what the organization as a whole can do to benefit the membership, and taking that into consideration. So I think that's just a little bit of like the shift that I have to keep mentally. But, as far as similarities go, like part of my role is, looking for revenue opportunities for CRMLS. So it's a lot of the same, kind of mindset that I had as a vendor. Like, how can we monetize, what we're doing, whether it's providing, like support to smaller organizations that don't have the resources to do so, or, putting together packages of products that we might want to kind of, and this is just a hypothetical because I don't know what we're going to do, but like, if we wanted to kind of change how we're offering products and services to our membership. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but it's just, things we have to think about, especially as, the industry is shifting, the market is shifting. There are new challenges facing real estate agents and brokers these days. So we just want to be mindful of that. And, the other thing that you have to keep in mind, whether you are a vendor or an MLS, is, little changes that you make to the products or to processes or whatever the case, like those things impact agents, and that impacts their business and their way of life. So you have to be very conscious of that and try to make those things as easy as possible for the end user.
Yeah, and I bet you come into it with such fresh eyes too, because you have been on the other side, and when you bringing on new products, probably can look at it from a totally different perspective to say, hey, like, I know that you guys are changing things, but now I have a different hat and I have to look out for our agents. And I bet that's really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't do a whole lot of like the product evaluation, but, I still have to keep up with what all we are doing. And, so it's interesting. It's definitely a new challenge, but that was what I signed up for when I took this role. And it's been very exciting, and I'm really happy that I made the move. So, yeah.
I have a question for you. It's something that I think about all the time. So as a salesperson in a past life, do you always know when people are trying to sell you? Because that happens to me all the time. I know all the tricks.
Yes.
So when I go somewhere and they're trying to sell me on something, I'm like, please, you're not going to outsell me in this situation, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like, I can see it coming from a mile away, but then I think I'm also like, there's a part of me that feels bad for the salesperson. So I'm also like typically an easier sell. Like, even though I see it coming, I'm like, okay, yeah, you're doing your best.
You're trying so hard. You're like thinking back to all the like sales trainings you took. Like, okay, like I know that move,
Right.
Yeah, for sure. It's like when we're walking in the mall and you have those people that try to hand you like lotions and stuff. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, yes, yeah.
My mom.
I'm just like, no, thank you.
Yeah, I always feel so
feel
bad
so
for them. My
bad.
mom just keeps walking and I'm like, oh no, you're trying. I know it's hard to stay there all day.
I know. And that's the other thing I try to keep in mind too. Like, I get emails all the time from people trying to sell me stuff. And I just like, I try to keep in mind, okay, like I've been on that side of things, and it's okay to say like, no, sorry, not interested, or, this is not something we need right now. But I try to be mindful of that and actually give a response instead of just ignoring, because I hate when I get ignored. So I just try to keep that in mind and
Yeah. You
try
know
not to
what? I
ignore.
hope that's great advice. As a salesperson myself, we're in a unique industry because it is very relationship based. So
Yeah.
I feel like in other sales industries that I've worked in, it is like I worked for a company that sold award software, like review and submission for like the Emmys and stuff like that when people nominate. And we had
Hmm.
literally like every organization in the world we could reach out to. And then you're just sending like hundreds of thousands of countless emails that are never going to be opened. But it
Right.
is nice. Like I would much rather somebody be like, "Hey, I really appreciate the email. We just, it's not in the cards for us. Even if they say
Yeah.
we think you're stupid, I would rather that than,
Right.
nothing. Because
Yeah.
then you keep emailing and you're like, hey, like, don't
Yeah,
forget
exactly.
about
It's like,
me. Yeah.
at least if you get a response and like, okay, they're not
And it's
interested, I'll just take that off.
it's
Yeah,
almost better for the person receiving the email because they're just going to be removed from the list and,
exactly.
yeah.
Yep.
So all right. Well, moving on kind of into my next segment here. Renew, which we founded, stands for Real Estate Network of Empowered Women. It's something that's really near and dear to my heart in particular, and that's just supporting women and creating a community for people, like me who have been inspired by people like you in this industry for so long. So, the first thing I really wanted to talk about is just like the value of mentorship. And I was
Mhm.
curious if you could tell just a little bit about how it could be female mentorship or mentorship in any kind has kind of lifted you up in your career to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there have been a few key people who have really mentored and helped me along the way. I mean, the first one I would say is Sarah Cooper. She was my boss at CRS. She, I don't know, I guess she saw something in me and just encouraged me to like I said, when I started at CRS, I was hired as a trainer, and ultimately that role kind of grew into more of like an MLS relationship kind of role. I wasn't directly involved in sales, but I did support the sales team. And that's how like I said, kind of built some of the relationships that I had with MLS executives. So I think that, having that kind of encouragement and just support to push a little bit further beyond like what my, title was at the time, that was really key. I mean, the other two people who have helped me tremendously, one was Greg, obviously. He was, I think, always one of my biggest cheerleaders, and always encouraged me to do more, to put myself out there, to go through like CMLX classes and ultimately apply to be on the CMLS board of directors, which then led me to taking a chance and applying to be on the RESO board of directors. So having that support from Greg, and just also having him as like a sounding board of things that I was doing or thinking about or whatever, and him saying like, that's a great idea, or no, that's terrible, don't do that. Like that was always really helpful. And then I think the other person who has been really a key mentor to me is Amy Gorse. We met probably, gosh, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. And I don't know, she was just one of those people, like, I think she was one of those women from the get-go. Like when I started in this industry, she just kind of caught my attention. She, obviously had a very powerful voice in the industry, what she was doing. I was also drawn to her fabulous taste in shoes. So there was just a connection
my
that
language.
I kind of felt. Yeah. There was a connection I kind of felt with her initially, and she's been a very big supporter of mine. She has throughout, especially like the past few years with the changes of W&R Studios getting sold and then me making different career changes. She's really been a great person for me to reach out to and talk about these things and get feedback. And again, like, same way with Greg, like, okay, that's a great idea. You might want to rethink that, that kind of thing. So it's just nice having those kind of people that have a little bit more experience than me that can help guide me and make the right decisions. So
yeah, and I think there's like so many things that you said there that are so inspiring. And the first one is just having somebody, you said that I guess she saw something in me. And I think that that's so powerful because we all need somebody to see something in us and believe in us. And it really only takes one person,
Definitely.
and they see things in us that we don't see in ourselves. And you look in the mirror. My one friend, Caroline, who works with me, I hope she laughs when she hears this, but like sometimes I'm like, I'm really nervous to do this podcast today, or I have to speak on stage. I'm nervous. And she's like, just look in the mirror and like point to yourself and tell you can do it. Like power stance. Yeah. I'm like, that's so silly. Yeah. Not doing it. She's like, do it. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do it. But I mean, all it takes is that one person to push us. And I'm sure it made all the difference in your life.
It does. And you have to remember like the Wonder Woman pose, like before you get on stage. Yeah. It helps.
Exactly. It helps. And fashion helps. The thing about the shoes, man, I wish I could take a poll of the entire country and say, how many of you have created a friendship by saying, I love those shoes? So many people, right?
Yeah,
friendships are started in that moment,
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I talk to my team all the time about it. I'm a firm believer. My last company wanted us to wear polos, and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't get behind it. I was like, I can't wear a polo. And it is meaningful. Maybe it's just me, but like I have to dress the way I want to feel. Even like when I'm on a work call and even if it's like an interview or something and I'm just talking on the phone, I can't sit in my sweats. Like I have to dress the way I want to feel. And same with like speaking on stage, or if you're comfortable wearing pink sequins with 12-inch heels, if that's what makes you comfortable, right, then do it. If you're comfortable in a black suit, whatever the case may be. But that stood out to me that you loved her shoes because that's a real part of life.
It really is. Yeah. And I think, as women, I always I got aggravated with Greg a lot. Like he would have his uniform. And I think you and Greg actually talked about this when you did his podcast. Like the men have their uniform of like their sports coat and, jeans and like a button down shirt or whatever. Yeah. But like for me, I mean, I have to spend like a lot of time thinking through like what my outfit is going to be for every day. And, I'm also very guilty of like, I don't want to wear the same thing more than once, which is like a really bad habit, but
I knew we were going to be friends for life. I knew it.
Yeah. But there's just something, like you said, there's something kind of empowering about having that, being able to like show your style along with whatever else you have to say, So.
Yeah. And Greg and I talked about this. I'm a severe overpacker. Like if I'm going for 5 days, I've got 17 dresses because one morning I might wake up and feel like yellow or I might feel like pink. You just never know, Guys do have it easy that way. We did talk about his like uniform and they just sometimes don't understand that it's not going to fly. That's why I do Rent the Runway. I just like pick my array of things. I ship it to the hotel. It gets there. I wear it, I send it back. I never have to dry clean. And it works.
I've definitely done that in the past as well. So I heard that. And I was like, yes, the Rent the Runway has saved me on many occasions. So
definitely a lifesaver. But one thing too, I wanted to to talk about that you said is that Greg, and I love Greg, and I think that he's funny and bright and has such a positive energy that you can just like feel when he walks into the room. But you said that like he's always there to tell you if an idea is bad, and we all need that friend in our life. And I think that the conversation around women empowerment is always tell each other that we're wonderful and fix each other's crowns and stuff. And I have a different opinion that like women empowerment and mentoring is not always being each other's cheerleader in that sense, but being okay to say, that's not a good idea. Like, don't, that's maybe don't do that. Or instead of maybe don't do that, like, why don't you think about it this way or try this? And I think it's so important for people to hear that part of your story, that you have had people that you consider mentors that have told you no. And I think there needs to be more of that.
No, absolutely. Could not agree more. I mean, I definitely, there's something to be said about like supporting other women. And yes, you don't want to like try, you don't want to approach it of like knocking someone down a peg or anything. Like that's not the idea. But yeah, I think if you see somebody doing something that is going to, be detrimental to them and, whatever their career development or whatever the case may be, I don't think there's anything wrong in letting them know that. And I think it has to come from a place of like sincere concern, and you have to approach it in the right way. You can't just be like, oh my gosh, Lauren, no, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. Like have some meaning behind it. But yeah, I think that's really the support that a lot of people need sometimes. Sometimes hearing no is the thing that you need to go in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think that you bring up such a positive point. It's like, you're not saying no to be rude, right? It's not coming from a place of malice where you're like, no, don't do that. Like, you're going to look dumb or silly or whatever. It's coming from a place of care and compassion. And, I'm an outsider and I can see it playing out differently, and just like, hear my point of view. You can take it or leave it, right? That's how it works.
Absolutely.
But I think that that's so important. So I do have another question. I read that you are an NAR Reach mentor. Just for people who might not know, can you kind of explain what that is and what you do for them?
Yeah, so that was a pretty short-lived stint, but it was interesting. I got asked to be a mentor. Gosh, I'm losing track of time now, but it was, I think, last summer. And essentially what I did was I met with some of the companies that like Second Century Ventures had either invested in or whatever. And part of the Reach mentorship was to, they had different people. Some were actual like owners of the company. For me, where I saw my value in helping some of these co-founders and founders was helping them make the connections at MLSs where they were interested in getting in and doing business. So it was really just kind of like hearing out the idea of what they had in mind, or what their business was actually doing. And then, I would just ask the question like, okay, what do you need from me? Do you just need a connection and an introduction? Easy peasy. I can do that. And really, like I said, that was really where most of my value came in. But I did try to use a little bit of my experience and like being in the industry and, knowing like the models that we use to sell to brokers and agents, and try to, just kind of share that experience as well.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And I think that it just leads to your care for helping others. And, you are so well connected, and making connections is really, I mean, at its core, what I wanted Renew to be, right? Like, we all know somebody who knows somebody, and we're just here to help each other and connect and be the best versions of ourselves. So I think that that's really cool. But I do have a question for you, and I've asked this question every time, and I know like maybe you shouldn't like repeat questions, but I love it. And you said you have a 2-year-old daughter, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, if you could go back in time and talk to a younger version of yourself and give them advice, what would you tell yourself?
Wow, that's a good question. I think I tell myself not to get so hung up on what everybody else thinks. I mean, I think that not, I don't, this might take a little bit of a turn for like a sad turn for a minute, but there's a point to it. So like I would say in 2012, that was like the year my life changed. My dad passed away unexpectedly. I went through a divorce, and then ultimately that's when I ended up leaving CRS and joining W&R Studios. And it was like that kind of series of events that, like I said, totally changed, I think, the direction that my life was going. But it was the week before my dad died. I had been back home visiting, and I was talking to him and telling him like how unhappy I was, particularly in my marriage. And, I told him I didn't know what to do. Like nobody in my family had ever gotten divorced. And I was just like scared of how that would look. And he told me, he was like, you know what? Life is too short to be unhappy. And like I said, that was the next week he died unexpectedly of a heart attack. And it was, that turmoil of like not knowing, not knowing how to handle that. I was extremely close to my dad. I'd never had anybody really close to me die before. And it was a really hard thing to deal with. And ultimately, like that was kind of the catalyst to me saying, you know what, my dad was right. Life is too short to be unhappy, and I'm not going to stay unhappy. And so I ended up leaving my husband, getting a new job. And it was kind of funny, like, talking about how Greg kind of brings a lightness and humor to things. When he actually offered me the job at W&R Studios and I told him I was going to take it, he was like, you're like one of those people in the action movies. It's like walking away and shit's just like blowing up behind them. I'm like, yes, that's how I feel. Like I'm just like blowing up my past life and making these changes. And I think that, had I not done that, and had I stayed in an unhappy marriage and worried about what everybody else was going to think about that, I would not be sitting here talking with you today. So that would be my advice. Just like, don't.
I do, for real. I think that's not to cut you off, but like it brings tears to my eyes because I think it's so true, right? I mean, I have been there in my life, and I brought up the cancer thing at the beginning of this, and this is not about me, it's about you. But I like went through a very similar thing in my life where it's just that moment when you realize we're not promised tomorrow. And you have to, hearing that with you is like, makes me emotional because you are the person you are today through all the pain and all the things that are blowing up behind you. And you are strong enough to walk away from the explosion. And I like hope that so many people on this that listen to this, hear that, because that is inspiring. And there's many people who don't walk away, and it might not be a relationship. It could be a job, right? We get into jobs where we're unhappy, or friendships, and I just like, I'm so proud of you. And I think that's really really inspiring, because it takes a lot to say, I don't care, and I have to do what's best for me.
Yeah. And I think, I think a lot of times people get scared to share their kind of personal journey of like how they ended up where they are. And, I think you said this in one of your previous podcasts, like you never know what somebody else is going through. Like, and I think that's something I try to keep in mind, but I do think that there's power in sharing, in sharing the tragedy that you go through, because ultimately if you can show that you can overcome it, like maybe it does help somebody else who's going through a hard time, and it helps them get over that hurdle of, being stuck in whatever situation they are in. And, I think it was like, and Danae said, like what Danae said about like how she learned to like categorize people like A, B, C, D. And like, if you're a D, delete them like that. I had that philosophy. I don't know if that was like, that wasn't the mindset that I had, or that wasn't the way that I learned it, but it was certainly like, that was kind of the approach I had to take of like, if it's not making me happy, then why am I keeping it in my life? So.
Yeah. And I think it takes a lot of self-reflection too to know what makes you happy. And
Mhm.
I think as women, and maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, so I won't categorize everybody, but I know I have felt like as a woman, I have to be perfect, right? Like I can't wear my
Mhm.
emotions on my sleeve. I need to be
Oh
down to
yeah.
business. I need to show I don't face adversity. Like I am Wonder Woman to
Yeah.
everybody else that views me. And let's be honest, I mean, I'm not. I'm so far from it.
Right.
I've faced my fair share of adversity. And I think it's so inspiring to hear you say, because a lot of people probably feel that way. Like, I don't want to talk about divorce. Like,
Right.
some people view that as a failure, but it's not. You chose
Yeah.
you, and
Yep.
that's all that matters.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think you bring up a good point there of like, feeling like as a woman, you have to always have yourself together and be put together and be on 100% of the time. And I think that in general, that's where we as women get held back, because there's this like there's a gender bias that women are, they're just seen as not as capable as
Yeah.
men. And it goes back to the whole philosophy of like, oh, a woman can't be president because she's too emotional. Like,
Yeah.
it's not true. I mean, women are emotional, but men are emotional too. They're just
Yeah.
different. It's just a different kind of dynamic. And I think that's where, as women, we have to stand up for ourselves more and be more assertive when we are looking for jobs or negotiating salaries or asking for promotions. Like, we should not be afraid to ask for what we want, because men aren't afraid to do that. And
Yeah.
I know I'm kind of generalizing here too, but I think it's still something important that a lot of people need to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure. We are just as worthy. And I think we just need people to continue to remind us of that. And because there has been a bias, and we're climbing an uphill battle, and we're getting closer
Mhm.
and closer to the top, but like we can't do it without each other. And I'm
Totally.
so proud of you. And we haven't known each other very long, so that might sound silly to say, but I think that you've overcome a lot of adversity, and you are so well respected. And
Yeah, thank
you
you.
have this little girl in your life, and this is like, I don't know why I'm even getting emotional, but you have this little girl who's going to look up to you. And that has to be such a rewarding feeling to say, like, I chose the best life for me, and you're going to be such a role model to her. And
Yeah.
that continued support for the upcoming generation is just like, we're going to break so many glass ceilings. And I said
Oh,
this at
100%.
Reso, but like, we're going to kick ass. We really
Yeah.
are. And
Yeah.
I'm just, thank you for being on this podcast and sharing your story, because it made me share. I haven't talked about my like personal ever either. I don't know why it just like came
Yeah.
out, but we should talk about it, and we're not perfect. And, you know,
Yeah.
it makes you more of a Wonder Woman to overcome those things than to just be great without overcoming anything. So,
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for having me. I'm so proud of you for like starting this podcast and starting Renew. I think this is something we have long needed in this industry. Just, supporting each other. And I think there's a younger generation that's going to be coming up, and we need to continue to foster more women leaders in the industry. And, nothing against men, but I
they're
just
great
want
in
to
their
see
own
more
way.
women out there. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you will always have a friend in me. And I want to
Thank
thank you
you.
again for agreeing to be a guest on our Renew podcast. But before we go, two things. One, anything exciting and new coming up with CRMLS that you want to talk about or promote?
Well, I think the big news that's come out fairly recently within the last probably 2 weeks is obviously we have been working on RE Distribute with Bright MLS. That is now officially launched, as well as Nestfully. That was an initiative we worked on with Bright and RE Colorado. So Nestfully is now live. So those are exciting. I know we've got some more stuff coming out in the coming months, but I probably can't talk about it just yet. So stay tuned. There's more coming.
We'll stay tuned. You'll have to give us announcements.
Definitely.
And then my second thing is your second pop quiz question. So my second question for you, and this is, I have a very big bias to two.
Okay.
Do you prefer wedges in the summertime or sandals?
Oh, I mean, honestly, it depends on the situation, but like if I'm trying to look cute, definitely wedges. So yeah.
I'm so short. Sandals, like I'm so used to wearing heels. If I'm wearing sandals, people are like, "What are you doing down there?" Like, oh, I just live down here. You didn't know about it though.
Yeah. Well, I'm like fairly tall. I'm like 5'8" without heels. And then, I mean, I used to like regularly wear like 3 and 4 inch heels. I can't really do that anymore. But yeah, I'd look like 6 foot tall, and then I take my heels off and people will be like, I had no idea you were so short.
Really? I didn't know. Well, that's kind of tall. I mean, that makes me feel really tall, small. I'm 5'4" and I'm like really small. But I guess you can't wear wedges in the sand. That would be a catastrophe. So I think there's some things that like sandals are appropriate.
Yeah, exactly.
For anybody listening, please make sure if you haven't signed up for Renew already, please do. There'll be a link in this as well to sign up. We have a lot of fun things coming up. We have a virtual event coming up for career building. That'll be exciting, and some in-person events coming up too. Please make sure to like our podcast on whatever podcast platform you listen to. And Katie, honestly, thanks again. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. This has been great. I've enjoyed talking with you.